A lot of fears going forward about what might happen with evictions and foreclosures after the year that we've experienced. And, federally, there was up until recently, prohibitions against eviction. Some states and localities have done the same thing, but a lot of those have faded away over the past few months, opening up the possibility that a wave of evictions could be following. There are certain areas where the fears of that are even higher, especially very densely populated cities. Thankfully, some states are doing the right thing. We do have a bill in New York to stop evictions. This bill would halt evictions and foreclosures for 60 days, which doesn't necessarily get you to the end of the problem, but in theory could be picked up again. And it allows tenants and mortgagors who have lost jobs or income due to the pandemic to submit financial hardship declarations that would halt those proceedings until May 1st. Governor Andrew Cuomo said Monday he would sign the legislation. The measure comes as the state grapples with what is likely to be billions of dollars in back rent owed by tenants financially hurt by the pandemic. The National Council of State Housing Agencies commissioned a report earlier this year estimating that New York could face a rent shortfall of as much as $3.4 billion by January. So one of the frustrations that I've had while, the evictions have been talked about, the eviction, moratoriums and things like that, is people seem to think, oh, you just need to set it off, like just stop it for a couple of months or whatever. But they don't seem to understand that if you couldn't afford to pay rent, it's not like the rent goes away. At the end, you're going to have to pay it off. And what do we expect people who've been out of work all year because of the pandemic to actually do? So this is again, a temporary solution with a little bit of financial assistance tied to it. But nowhere in this bill are they talking about $3.4 billion in assistance to people who couldn't pay their rent.
Yeah. And the thing is we all know that this is going to have a sort of a chain reaction because there are landlords who, like, for instance, me, I own property and I have tenants. But if those tenants couldn't pay, that would be pretty detrimental for me. And that would require some struggle on my behalf. And there are a number of landlords who are like me, but the vast majority of the landlords in New York City, or I guess the ones that the government actually cares about, are these large companies, and they have a considerable amount of money. Also, the thing I think it's so important to remember is that New York has been having a housing crisis for the last few decades. In the mid-90s through 2008, that mortgage crisis, real estate firms were buying up and seizing properties throughout New York, and they were increasing the rent astronomically. They increased it by nearly 400% for the five boroughs, leaving out Staten Island. And that's based on the mayor's management report and the comptroller's budget. So they've known in New York that they've had a housing shortage problem that's affordable for people, and also that these major companies have increased rents to the point where people cannot pay for them. So now you're in this situation where you have these landlords wanting to make sure that they're taken care of. Clearly, since they've been hiking rents, they've been taken care of for some time now. The government needs to do something to take care of the people.
No, I'm glad that someone is finally watching out for the Jared Kushners of the world. That's definitely a concern. We've been speculating a little bit about going forward, what might happen, and we do have at least a vague idea. Legislators say that the extended ban gives them time to create a more expansive rental assistance program and to distribute relief funds. An existing $100 million rent relief program was approved over the summer, but less than half of that money has been distributed thus far. New York will get additional rental assistance funds under the latest federal stimulus package. Hope so, and hope that it's more significant for the first, because if you are facing a $3.4 billion rent shortfall and you've given out $50 million so far, and you're really hoping to work hard and do a bit more, that is a disaster. And unless you take it seriously, the question is just going to be, when is that disaster? When is that disaster? May 2nd? Is it a month or two after that? And what happens? What are the ripple effects from potentially, someone could try to run the math on how many people could end up being evicted, but it is going to be very significant. That is not just a problem for some individuals. That is devastating to entire neighborhoods. And so we're going to have to see, this is a good step from New York. A lot of states aren't doing this. But going forward, the follow-up legislation is going to be at least as important to make sure that this isn't just, holding off the disaster until a little bit later.